Hey Hope Church, Pastor Matt here. I am in Southern California this weekend, specifically Ontario, California, celebrating a huge milestone with one of our 17-6 network churches, Church in the Valley. This weekend in this building behind me, starting tonight, Saturday night, they're having their 35th anniversary celebration, and then tomorrow morning during the Sunday worship service will be the grand opening of this brand new facility. In 1987, in mid-September, Randy and Cindy Lathrop started Church in the Valley, and they have been a mobile church since that time. And now, as they're celebrating their 35th anniversary, God has provided this building behind me. God provided the building back in December, and they've been in and out of this space, renovating it, doing some improvements. So I have the honor to be here in Southern California representing Hope Church as we celebrate Word Church in the Valley. Because in 1987, we sent Randy and Cindy Lathrop to start Church in the Valley, and Church in the Valley is one of our daughter churches. So this is a big weekend and a great chance to celebrate with Church in the Valley. Well, this weekend here in Fort Worth, we are wrapping up our series, Detour. And we've been using the life of Joseph, that is the dreamer, favorite son of his father, who was betrayed by his brothers and sold into slavery, who was then falsely accused after doing the right thing before God and his slave master and wrongly put in prison, who then was raised to be second in command of all of Egypt. That Joseph. We've been using his life as a case study during this series. Now, Joseph's life, similar to ours, he takes a series of detours. But one of the things that God has used with those detours in his life is those were actually the path that God had him on, the path of development, so that he could become the man that he needed to be, so that God could do all that he wanted to do through the life of Joseph. As we wrap this series up, I've asked Pastor Jeremy to join me in the teaching of this final message. You'll get to hear from Pastor Jeremy in just a minute, live and in person. But I had a few things I wanted to share with you as we finish this series. Already in the series, we have looked at Joseph and his family. That was week 1. Joseph and his choices. Joseph and his heart. That was last week. And then today, we're going to wrap up by looking at Joseph and his legacy. You know, legacy is kind of an interesting concept. The younger you are, you kind of really don't think much about a legacy at all. And the older you get, you increasingly think more and more about a legacy. Well, what is even a legacy? A simple definition of a legacy could be this. A legacy is what you leave behind for others. Whether or not you're thinking about it, whether or not you're intending to, you and I leave things behind for others. The truth is we all leave a legacy. In fact, our legacies are really established by the small decisions that we make over the course of our life. And then when we're no longer on this planet, what we leave behind for others is our legacy.
When we talk about legacies in the Bible, a great place to start is actually in the New Testament, in Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews 11 lists some heroes from the Old Testament who walked by faith. And it's really neat. If you haven't read Hebrews 11 recently, go back sometime this week, make a note of that, to go read that. It's a real fun read. It lists the name of the hero and then like one or two just really quick snippets of what was their pinnacle moment of faith as they lived. And so just to kind of give you an idea of what's in there, Hebrews 11:7, this comes straight from Hebrews, says, by faith, Noah, right? He's the guy who built the big boat. We love Noah. When warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear, built an ark to save his family. Yes, love Noah, big faith, go Noah, right? Very next verse, Hebrews 11:8, by faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. Yeah, Abraham, walked by faith. We love Abraham. Big faith. Go Abraham, right? Well, Joseph is also listed in Hebrews 11 in this list of heroes of faith. And I was real curious. So what was Joseph's pinnacle of faith? Well, don't look ahead, okay? If you have your Bible out, don't look ahead. I actually want to have a little fun with this. What do you think Joseph's moment of faith would be? Okay, we've looked at Joseph for the last 3 weeks. Here's some possibilities. Was it Joseph, by faith, believed the dreams God gave him as a teenager? That's a good option. Was it Joseph, by faith, refused Potiphar's wife and bore the consequences? Yeah, big faith, absolutely. Or was it Joseph, by faith, stood before Pharaoh and interpreted Pharaoh's dreams? Took a lot of faith. Yeah, go Joseph. Or was it Joseph, by faith, forgave his brothers and provided for them in Egypt? Yeah. Or was it something else? Is there another option? So go ahead and lock in your answer in the seat back in front of you, what you think the correct answer is. And then later on, we'll look back at what the answer is for Joseph. But when we think of legacies in our time, we often think of just the rich and famous who leave big legacies behind. We think of people like John D. Rockefeller, right, who left a huge legacy behind, or sports figures like Muhammad Ali, really, really big legacy. Or even recently departed Queen Elizabeth II, who leaves a long legacy behind her. But the reality is, it's not just the rich and famous. Everyone leaves a legacy of some kind. Everyone leaves a legacy, you and me and everyone else. And our legacies are made not in one large moment, but they're made over small daily decisions. Legacies are most often made over just small daily decisions in life. The drunk, angry person leaves a legacy behind. Right? The caring mother who takes care of her family leaves a legacy behind. The honest businessman leaves a legacy. And they're based on the daily decisions that we make. And Joseph left a legacy based on the decisions he made throughout his life. And there are 4 pieces of Joseph's legacy that I really want to key in on this morning. And it's 4 pieces that can really impact us if we have these same traits in our lives. First of all, part of Joseph's legacy, he was a man of loyalty. A man of loyalty. And loyalty is pretty easy. It's measured by answering the question, how much do people trust me? How much do people trust me? And loyalty is most clearly seen in our relationships with family and authorities over us. This is where you really see if somebody is loyal or not. Family and authorities over me, do they trust me? Right? Do they trust me to not cut corners? They don't have to look over my shoulder all the time. Joseph was loyal to Potiphar even though he was a slave. Joseph was loyal to the prison warden even though he himself was a prisoner. Joseph was loyal to Pharaoh even though he came from a different land. And did those authorities trust Joseph? Well, what we see in the Bible is absolutely yes. In fact, after the famine is over and things have gone good for a little while, Joseph's father, Jacob, passes away. And Jacob wanted to be buried back in his homeland. And so Joseph goes to Pharaoh and asks, he says, hey, Pop really wanted to be buried back in the homeland. Is it okay if I go back and bury Pop back there? And without hesitation, it seems, Pharaoh says, absolutely yes. In fact, we're going to take care of Pop. He says, I'm going to send supplies, I'm going to send chariots, I'm going to send a group of professional mourners with you. Go get it done. Do it right. You know, for you and me, this would be a pretty easy ask. Hey, boss, can I go bury my father? You know, I'm going to be driving to the next state over, be there a day or two, come back. I'll be gone 4 days max. Right? In this day and time, travel took days, and the length of mourning was long. On top of that, as far as we know, this is the first time Joseph is going back to his homeland since he left as a teenager. So there's a lot going on here. But Joseph asks the Pharaoh, hey, can I go bury Dad in his homeland? Pharaoh doesn't hesitate. Yes, because Joseph was a man of loyalty. Do people trust you? Especially those close to you, family and authorities over you. Are you loyal to them? Do they know you're going to put their interests above your own? Joseph's legacy was a man of loyalty, but he was also a man of forgiveness. Pastor Brian spoke on this last week, that forgiveness is releasing a person from the wrongs they've done against you. And by faith, Joseph forgave his brothers. And we see this twice. When Joseph first reveals his identity to them and says, I'm Joseph, and he forgives them. And then a little bit later, when Jacob, the father, passes away, and the brothers are a little nervous again, like maybe he was just nice to us because Pop was still alive, Joseph reaffirms his forgiveness and says, no, what you guys meant for evil, God meant for good, and Joseph forgives them. But it can often be hardest to forgive those who are closest to us. Right? The hardest people to forgive are the people closest to us. And Joseph, he forgave his brothers of some pretty serious offenses. And Joseph doesn't sugarcoat it. He says, what you guys did was evil. You guys meant evil for me. You sold me as a slave. Some of y'all wanted to kill me, like not figuratively, like literally first-degree murder, cover it up, TV show kind of things. Like literally you wanted to kill me. And I think this is actually a good note for us as we clear up relationships with each other, that Joseph didn't sugarcoat it and say, it wasn't that big a deal. You guys didn't mean it. No, it was a big deal. They sold him as a slave. They meant it. But Joseph is willing to forgive them. What does it look like for you to be a person of forgiveness, especially to those closest to you? Are you holding on to hurts and grudges from the past? Is there an area where you personally have refused to forgive? Would you be characterized as a person of forgiveness? It was part of Joseph's legacy. And he was also a man of perspective. We looked at this a couple of weeks ago. Our perspective is the lens that we look at the world through, or it's kind of like how we think the world really works. And Joseph had a God-centered perspective. Have you ever had something bad happen, like really bad, and you thought there's just no way any good could come out of this? Maybe you got fired from your job unexpectedly, and you're like, there's no way good could ever come from this. Or maybe a big blow up with your spouse. You think, I don't know if we can get over this one. You're like, I don't see how any good could ever come from this. Or maybe the engine in your car died and you don't have any money to get another car. You're like, there's no way good could come from this, right? This is bad. This is the worst, right? Do you think Joseph ever had these thoughts? What did it actually mean to be a slave, to be sold into slavery? At 17 years old, he's tied up, he's thrown in a pit. These guys come by who don't speak his language, but he's sold as a slave to him. And I'm sure they're yelling at him, they're yanking at him, they're probably doing all kinds of mean things. And then after a few days, they travel to Egypt, and now he's in another land where people are speaking another language that he doesn't understand. He's bought, and now he's in a guy's house who doesn't speak his language, who's yelling at him, and who knows what. And it'd be so easy for Joseph to think, there's no way good could come from this. There's no way out of here. But Joseph sees God's goodness and God's faithfulness. And then he's thrown in prison. And it's so easy for Joseph to think, there's no way good could come from this ever. But Joseph's perspective is that God's plan is bigger than his own life. God's plan is bigger than his own life. Joseph again and again sees God's goodness and sees God's faithfulness. But through time, Joseph sees also that God's plan is going beyond just his own life. And he also has the perspective that God is able to transform evil acts into good results. God can transform evil acts into good results. Is there some situation maybe that you're in right now where you'd be tempted to say, there's no way good could come out of this? This is just too far. Well, God's plan is bigger, and God's goodness and God's faithfulness continues. God is able to transform evil into good results. Joseph was also a man of faith. And we see incredible faith repeated throughout Joseph's life. In fact, we started this morning looking at some possible moments for Joseph's Hebrews 11 Hall of Faith moment. So I want to come back to that. So can we get the list of options here? Okay, what was Joseph's moment of faith in Hebrews 11? When he believed the dreams, when he refused Potiphar's wife, stood before Pharaoh, when he forgave his brothers. Is there something else that we're missing here? Well, let's take a look at the answer. Hebrews 11:22. Here we go. By faith, Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instructions concerning the burial of his bones. Really? I had to read it again. By faith, Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt. That's going to happen decades later. And gave instructions concerning the burial of his bones. What is the writer of Hebrews talking about here? Well, let's go back to the story of Joseph in Genesis. This is decades later, after the famine has come and gone, and Father Jacob has passed away years ago. This is late in Joseph's life. He's 110 years old at this point. He's seen grandkids born. He's seen even great-great-grandkids born in Egypt. And we pick up the story in Genesis 50, verse 24. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die. He's 110. But God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land, to the land he promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Joseph made the Israelites swear an oath and said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up from this place. So why this? Why is this Joseph's pinnacle moment of faith? Well, at this point, Joseph has been in Egypt for a little over 90 years. The rest of his family, around 70 years. And he's looking ahead to when his people will actually leave Egypt. And Joseph sees ahead that it is not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy to pull up roots. It's not going to be easy to move on. But Joseph also has some kind of foresight, some kind of prophecy that the nation of Egypt is going to oppress his people. And you see this twice in these verses that we just looked at. He says, God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land. And again, he says, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones from this place. If God needs to come to their aid, it means something's happening where they can't leave on their own. They need God's help. And so Joseph is looking ahead at God's provision. Already in Joseph's life, he's seen the zigzag, and we've looked at this graph the last couple weeks, that throughout Joseph's life, it looks like things are going well, looks like things are going bad. Looks like things are going well, they're going bad. They're going good, they're going bad. And each of these zigzags looks like a detour in Joseph's life. But Joseph is able to look back at his life and see that God's goodness and God's faithfulness is a straight line to fulfill God's will and to fulfill everything that was promised to Joseph. And now at the end of his life, Joseph sees that that straight line of God's goodness and God's faithfulness is going to continue far beyond his own life. He's looking decades, even centuries into the future and saying, my bones are going to be a testament to God's goodness and God's faithfulness generations into the future after I'm gone. God's plan continues well beyond his own life. If you're familiar with the story between Joseph and when the people actually leave Egypt, time passes after Joseph dies, and the Israelites as a nation are enslaved in Egypt. And then more generations pass while the people of God are enslaved. And then finally Moses shows up on the scene to bring the people out of Egypt. How long were they there? Well, Exodus 12, verse 40 says, now the length of time the Israelite people lived in Egypt was 430 years. Now, 430 minus the years Joseph was alive. Anyway, hundreds of years between Joseph and when Moses shows up to lead the people out of Egypt. And then check this out. Exodus 13:19. This is the morning that Moses is leading the people out. It says, Moses took the bones of Joseph with him because Joseph had made the Israelites swear an oath. He said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up with you from this place. Just a little perspective. 400 years, we don't have a good concept of 400 years. The original pilgrims on the Mayflower landed here on this continent right about 400 years ago. Some of you are going to look it up. November 1620 is when the Mayflower landed. The United States has been a nation for less than 250 years total. So with that in mind, how incredible is it that the morning of the Exodus, that they remember to take Joseph's bones? Now think about it, right? If you know the story of the Exodus, there were 10 plagues on the nation of Egypt, and the country's been destroyed, the economy's been destroyed, and then the 10th plague, the firstborn son of every household that doesn't have blood on the doorposts is killed in the night. And the next morning, the Pharaoh is just enraged, and he calls Moses in. He says, you and all your people, get out of here, leave now. I never want to see you again. Go, get out. Well, the people of Israel, they'd packed up the night before, so they're mostly ready. And I can only imagine, Moses is checking his packing list on his iPhone as he heads out, right? Got snacks for the road, check, right? I got my comfy walking sandals, check. Dig up old guys' bones who came over on the Mayflower. Yeah, we're kind of in a hurry this morning, right? But they did it. They take the bones of Joseph with them because of Joseph's legacy, but also to fulfill the prophecy that God's plans and God's goodness and God's faithfulness continues far into the future, far beyond our own lives. And Joseph's bones are a testament to God's goodness and God's faithfulness. Joseph's legacy was a man of loyalty, forgiveness, perspective, and faith. In fact, he ends up being listed among the rock stars of faith in Hebrews 11. And as we said earlier, everyone leaves a legacy of some kind, made by the decisions we make day by day. And one of the encouraging things is that it's never too late to change your legacy. It's never too late to change your legacy. Whatever your age, whether you're in your 20s, in your midlife, your 70s or 80s, you can still change the legacy that you leave behind you. As long as you have breath in your lungs, you can make different decisions moving forward. I'm reminded of the story of a man named Alfred who lived in the mid-1800s. You may have heard of him. Alfred was a scientist. He was a chemist who made a very good living for himself inventing the compounds for explosives. He's credited with inventing dynamite and TNT, as well as blasting caps. And Alfred had in mind that these would be used to blast through mountains and make tunnels for the railroads and for roadways and to help society moving forward. And later in life, after he'd made quite a good living for himself, in 1888, Alfred opened up the morning newspaper to find out he was dead. He found his obituary in the morning newspaper. Now, the fact was, Alfred's brother had passed away the day before, but the writer was given the wrong name. And so they wrote an obituary about Alfred. The headline read, "The Merchant of Death is Dead." Merchant of Death. Went on to say, "The man who made a fortune by finding ways to kill more people faster than ever before died yesterday." Alfred was shocked. He was a scientist, not a murderer. But when you're dealing with explosives, where one person sees roadways, another person sees weapons, agents of mass killing. But Alfred didn't succumb to the fact that his legacy was finished, that it was already written. He still had life left, and he decided to make different decisions moving forward and create a different legacy. And he invested a large portion of his wealth and set up endowment funds for people who excelled in physics and chemistry, medicine, and literature. He endowed scholarships for people who did the most to advance peace in their own lifetime. And in 1901, 5 years after Alfred's death, the very first Nobel Peace Prize was awarded, named after Alfred Nobel. Alfred Nobel didn't just give in to the notion that his legacy was already written, but he made the choices, he made the daily decisions to change his legacy moving forward. What would you like for people to say about you after you leave this earth? Right now, what do you think people would say? What do you think your obituary would look like? When you look beyond your life, is there a different legacy that you would like to leave? And are you willing to start making different decisions today, tomorrow, this week, to change the legacy that you leave behind? Pastor Matt is going to close out this sermon series with a brief video. So check out this video from Pastor Matt.
Joseph is one of my favorite stories in the entire Bible. And there is so much that we can learn from the life of Joseph, so many things that I personally find challenging and encouraging. I find challenging the fact to keep my focus on God and the bigger picture, not just the circumstances that I find myself in any given day or any given moment within a day. I find it challenging to view my circumstances in light of God and who He is, and not to view God in light of my circumstances, however difficult they may be. Pastor and author Chuck Swindoll has said this: "The longer I live, the more convinced I become that life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how we respond." I'm challenged by the life of Joseph, but I am encouraged in how Joseph responded, how he responded to the things that happened in his life. He responded by choosing to do what was right before God and others, even in incredibly difficult circumstances. It's encouraging when I think about the strategic reversals that he made, how he rejected the dysfunction from his past and he chose differently as he moved on into the future. But the most encouraging thing that I find with the story of Joseph's life is this, is that the middle is not the end of the story. I don't know how you're feeling right now. I don't know if you are on one of the mountain tops or down in one of the valleys. But if you're participating with us, you have breath in your lungs. I want you to know that you're somewhere in the middle of your story. And just like Joseph, there were times where it looked really dark when he was in the pit, when his brothers, just before his brothers sold him. Then when he was a slave, and then when he found himself in prison. There were some dark days for Joseph where it looked like it was the end, but that wasn't the end. That was just somewhere in the middle of his story. So for you and I, the middle is not the end of our story. In fact, just like Joseph, we can choose differently. Joseph let his past inform his present, but he didn't let his past define his future. And just like Joseph, we too can choose differently. It doesn't matter what we've done or what's been done to us in the past. We can choose differently in the present moment, and we can choose to live our life differently as we walk forward. And maybe you are in the middle of something that feels like a detour right now, but you can actually make different choices. And this could be the path that God has you on as he's developing you into the person he wants you to become so that he can do all the things that he wants to do through your life. In fact, I've heard it that the gospel simply stated like this: I don't have to stay the way that I am. And I find that so encouraging. I don't have to stay the way that I am, and you don't have to stay the way that you are. If you don't like how things are right now, again, we actually have choices that we can make. Just like Joseph made choices and left a different legacy than his brothers were leaving, just like Alfred Nobel made a different choice and left a different legacy than the one that was wrongly printed in the newspaper, you and I can choose to leave a much different legacy, even if we don't like the legacy we've been building up to this very moment. In fact, the way that we can start to build a new legacy is when we decide to follow Jesus. When we decide to put our hope and our trust and our faith in Jesus, he is the one who can initiate and help us having real, lasting life change. So if you'd like your life to be different, I want to invite you to decide to follow Jesus. Would you bow with me in prayer? Father, you are God. You are the God of our past. You are the God of our present. And you are the God of our future. Thank you that we have men like Joseph and others mentioned in Hebrews chapter 11. Men who walked by faith with you and can be a great example for us. And thank you that we can find purpose and peace and power as we decide to follow Jesus. Now, if you feel like your life has just been one giant detour and you want to surrender to Jesus, that is, you want to make him your Savior and your Lord, I want to invite you to just pray along something like what I'm about to pray. Just quietly pray this along in your heart, and you can begin a new journey in life with Jesus right now. Say something like this: Dear Jesus, thank you for making me and loving me, even when I've ignored you and I've gone my own way. I realize that I have rebelled against you. I ask you to please forgive me. Thank you for dying on the cross for me. Please help me to understand it more, but as much as I know right now, I want to follow you. Please come into my life and make me a new person on the inside. I accept your free gift of salvation, and I ask that you would please help me to grow now. Father, thank you for those who've prayed along with me and begun this new life in Jesus. I pray for all of us that you would show us what our next steps are, and then you would give us the courage to take those steps. And I ask all this in the name of Jesus. Amen.